is to drop every single thing we thought we knew about ourselves and the world. Indeed, Zazen is an art form, a kind of art form of forgetting. To sit on this cushion, on this morning, in this body, is to forget names, to forget stories, to forget opinions, and just be. Dogen has a marvelous, or gives us a marvelous invitation to this forgetting of the self, the forgetting of everything we thought we knew. And he puts it like this, he says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. And when actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. And he goes on to say that no trace of even enlightenment remains. And this no trace continues endlessly. So how curious it is that in order to study the self, in order to meet our true self, we must forget the self. And of course, this forgetting of the self is forgetting the self that we have been so busy making up. Zazen is the opportunity to let that go, to drop entirely through all of that invention into just what is happening right now. Feel your weight on the cushion. Feel the warmth of your body. Feel the air as it moves around your face and into your nostrils, into your body, falling right through your body, falling right from your body with an exhale. Coming and going, this moment is never astray. And it's the fact that this is never astray that we can depend upon entirely. The fact that we can drop into exactly what is without effort, but with a kind of ease and trust that everything is provided for right now. There is nothing to search for, nothing to claim, nothing to invent. This is to allow the myriad beings, whether they be the smells or sights or colors or tastes, sensations, to affirm themselves, not as some kind of other, but as you. One Ramon Jimenez, a poet I've been enjoying recently, puts it this way. He says, silence is the fountain of time. Silence is the fountain of time. In Zazen, we bathe in this silence. We surrender to this silence completely. It is a silence from which all things spring, rising up, gurgling, bubbling, and then falling back in. It is the silence of this fountain of time that we touch in Zazen. And some of you will recall in the Shodoka, the song of freedom that we recite in every sesshin gathering that we have, that Sensei says, it speaks in silence. In silence you hear. Sorry, in speech you hear its silence. To realize these words of Sensei, simply trust that silence is the fountain of time. Silence is the fountain of time. And we don't need to go looking for this silence. Of course, this silence is manifest, is no other than whatever appears before you. This silence is enjoyed in the very gurgling and bubbling and laughing of the fountain. The fountain that is our body, our true body. The body that is gurgling and laughing and bouncing right now in this sitting. Just to splash a bit more water around, I want to give you a little moment of a poem from Randall Jarrell, who in his own way encountered the bright, bubbling splash of water and how it can revive our appreciation of direct life. He said it this way in a verse from one of his own poems. He said, sometimes the wheel turns of its own weight. The rusty pump pumps over your sweating face the clear water. Cold, so cold. You cup your hands and gulp from them the dailiness of life. In Zazen, we allow this wheel of life, the wheel of the Dharma, to turn of its own accord. We don't tinker with it. We don't try to improve what's going on. We don't try to change what's going on. We allow the wheel to spin of its own accord. And we let the clear water of whatever is happening splash across our face. Sometimes cold, so cold. Sometimes hot, so hot. Sometimes subtle, so subtle. And yet always clear, clear water. This is the water that we rinse ourselves in, that we bathe in Zazen. Crisp and clear, endlessly particular, bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, not around this body, but as this body. And we dare to cup our hands, open ourselves up entirely and gulp the dailiness of life. Swallow it whole. Drink it up. To cup our hands and drink the dailiness of life. I love that Randall Jarrell celebrates the dailiness of life, the astonishing ordinariness of each and everything. There is nothing special to go searching for here. There is just the marvelous fact of each thing appearing and disappearing in its own time. This is the fountain of time, the genesis of which is a great mystery. The genesis of which is silence or emptiness or no other. And yet to drop away completely into this silence and behold and become this fountain of time demands an interesting kind of courage. An interesting kind of courage that I want to call humility. To sit in Zazen is a humble, humble, humble act. It is a humble way of being. And I have C.S. Lewis in mind here when I think of this humility. C.S. Lewis said, humility is not thinking less of myself. It is thinking of myself less. Isn't this interesting that to be genuinely humble demands that we think of ourselves less? In fact, that we go as far as forgetting ourselves entirely. That we allow the preoccupation with self to just fall away and then reveal what is already here, brimming, full, miraculous in its dailiness. It's also interesting to reflect that the word humility relates to the word humus. In fact, it has its Latin root in the word humus, which is of the ground, of the earth. This practice of sitting on the ground, being grounded, being earthed in practice, is being humble, is being humus, is revealing the earth in its entirety. We honor the earth when we focus our attention on what the earth is doing, rather than on the small self that we pedantically make up time and time again. And so much flows from this sense of earthiness. And I mean flow literally. Flowing in the sense of this fountain that I've been talking about. Because another word that relates to this hummus and this humility is, of course, human. And closely related to this word human is the word humour. Humour, which originally referred to bodily fluid, but which I would like to play with and turn around and say, it is the fluid body. To become human is to recognize our own sense of humour, our own sense of flow, which is the ability to play with just what's happening, to turn with our circumstances, which always has an edge of surprise, an edge of absurdity sometimes. We laugh in our life because so much of it is unfathomable. So much of it is cold on our face, to the point where we can only break out in laughter and cry out in appreciation or joy. Zazen really is a joyous practice. Even in the darkest times, we can find ourselves having a chuckle at just how ever-changing our situation really is. Never permanent, never repeating, always bubbling up like this laughing fountain. That is our true body. And with this sense of humility, of humour and humanness in mind, I'd like to give the last word of this talk to all of our old friends, Winnie the Pooh and Rabbit, who do such a good job right through their adventures in the 40-acre wood of showing us just how fun, how ever-changing this life is. And I think also they do such an excellent job of showing us how to forget our small selves, how to learn to play with this life and all of its concerns, but to do so with skill, because we are no longer holding on to a mean, tight, restricted version of who we are. So here's a tiny little encounter with Winnie the Pooh and Rabbit, which I'll leave this talk with. It's very short, but it always puts a smile on my face and refers very much to this forgetting of the self. It goes like this. "Hello, Rabbit," Pooh said. "Is that you?" "Let's pretend it isn't," said Rabbit, "and see what happens." Our practice here together on the cushions is not just to pretend that we are not this self or not Rabbit, but to realize this completely. So let go. Allow your body and mind to fall away and become just what is happening, minus your opinions about it.